Christian circles for a while, you hear this kind of language, I'm working for God. Well, the language Paul uses, now I'm working for God, I'm working together, God's laboring with me, and I'm laboring with him. And that is, I think, a much better way to look at it. It's not like God's off some faraway place, or Jesus is off at some distance, just sort of indifferent, and we're trying to impress him, by all the work that we do. No, this is all his plan, by the way. It's all his work. So we're just laboring together with him. Now, he says, verse 10, according to the grace of God, which is given unto me. He's referring now, of course, to himself and his preaching, and he said it's by the grace of God. And then now he changes, I skipped a bit, sorry about that. Where did I skip to? Oh, verse 8. Now he that planteth and he that watereth are one, and every man shall receive his own reward according to his own labor. Verse 9. We are laborers together with God. You are God's husbandry. Now that's a funny word that we don't use much nowadays. Another translation says, you are God's garden. And that's a little more understandable. Garden is where you plant things, where things grow. And it says, we are God's garden. In other words, the analogy is, or the thought is that he's planting in our lives. And if you remember, Jesus used this very same analogy in one of his parables. Remember the one about the sower sows the word? Remember that one? The sower sows the word, and some of the word fell on different kinds of ground. And then when it fell on the good ground, it brought forth fruit, some 30, some 60, some 100-fold. Remember that story? I used to read that parable, and it would make me feel really nervous. And I think, I want to be, we all want to be the good ground, of course. And if you read it in the different Gospels, it gives you a little clue how you can be sure that you are the good ground. It says, he that heareth the word and keepeth it, Jesus said, is like the good ground. So all you got to do is make up your mind, when I hear the word, I'm going to keep hold of it. That's what it means. Whoever hears the word keeps it. And so you can choose then. It's not just some thing that's outside of you. You can choose to hear the word and take hold of it. Now sometimes you find out that in the world, there are different kinds of ways the word is. Sometimes people in the world are indifferent. Have you ever noticed that? Some people are indifferent to the word. I don't know if you've had that experience or not. But you don't have to be indifferent. He said the good ground is like the person who hears the word, in other words, and takes it seriously and keeps it. That's what he says, keeps it. Then he says about the good ground, he that hears the word and keeps it, Jesus said, is like a ground that brings forth 30, 60, and 100-fold. Now I used to think that meant three different kinds of people. There's me, the carnal Christian, 30-fold, and then there's the people that I look up to. They are like 100-fold. But I don't think it's that way. I don't think it means that at all. I think it's a progression. I think it means the more that you hold the word, it increases more and more and more, and it grows. Because if you look at other parables, Jesus said the kingdom of God is like a man that sowed seed in the ground, and it began to grow. He doesn't even know how. And the seed grew and became a great tree. And the fowls of the air came and lodged in the branches. And that implies that he sows the word in our hearts, and it is a progressive growth. So I think what he means by that 30, 60, and 100-fold, now I assume you've read those. I'm not turning to those. You know what I'm referring to. It means in our lives as we grow. In other words, there's a process by which the word is more and more productive as we go along. So that gives me a little hope. It lets me know that I'm not yet where I'm going to be as the word progresses in my life. And it also tells me that it's not about me, it's about the word. And I'm just the ground that the word's growing in. And here's what Paul says, you are God's husbandry, meaning the same thing. You are the place in which his word is planted. And he gives us this thought in our minds that something of God's plan and his kingdom and his purposes in us as Christians is being fulfilled and carried out and brought about as he's planted his word through these ministers, Paul and Apollos, and then whoever it might be by extension, and it grows and produces fruit. Sometimes we get a sort of one-sided view of things. I think it's because we tend to be insecure sometimes in our relationship with God, and we think only in terms of I want, you hear a lot of preaching, or I used to. I had this impression that you need to get saved so you can die and go to heaven. And it's all about me getting from here to there. And I hope I've done enough good things. I hope I can make it in. Well, God's got more in mind. I like to say it this way. God's got more in mind than just getting you from here to there. That's part of it, but he's got more. See, he's planting his word in us because he wants to get what's happening there happening here. He wants our lives to be like a garden. And again, it's not us, it's him. We're the ground, he's the garden. But now Paul changes the metaphor. And he says it this way. You are God's husbandry, then, he says, you are God's building. Now we have another picture, another word image, building. So if there's a building, then there's a builder. Now Paul says in verse 10, according to the grace of God which is given unto me, as a wise master builder, I have laid the foundation. What did he mean by that? Well, I came and started. In Corinth, he's the first one to preach to them. In other words, I laid the foundation here. Now remember, the overall subject we're talking about here, back in the beginning of chapter 1, he said, I wanted to speak to you as unto spiritual, but I found that I could not because you were yet carnal. And he said, the reason you're carnal is you're divided up, looking at these different teachers, and you're seeing it all as a division of different kinds of messages, I suppose. But what he's intimating is, what I wanted to speak to you as spiritual has to do with seeing things in a little different way, and that's what he's trying to correct here with this. And so he says, according to the grace of God which is given unto me as a wise master builder, I have laid the foundation, and another buildeth thereon. Now, to be specific, he's talking about the fact that he came and preached first to them, and then others came and preached later. He says, but let every man take heed how he buildeth thereupon. Now, why does he say that? Well, if you think about building a house, you put the foundation down first. And I'll tell you one thing, if the foundation is not very good, nothing you build on top of it's going to be very secure or very stable. You can understand that. So you want to have a good, solid, firm, accurate, right, correct foundation. And then the other thing is, whatever you build on that foundation has to be compatible with it. Does that make sense? It has to fit. And if it doesn't fit, there's going to be some problems. If the foundation is one way and what's built on it is not matched with the foundation, you're liable to have, as it builds, you're liable to have some difficulties. Now, the reason he says that, let every man take heed how he buildeth thereupon, he's saying you've got to be careful what you add to or what you build on. He's talking about preaching or the message. Now he said, I laid the foundation. Now he specifies what it means, verse 11. For other foundation can no man lay than that is laid, which is Jesus Christ. Now that's such a simple and straightforward message. It's easy to read over that and not really consider it. But he's saying, I've laid the foundation, and then he says, here's what the foundation is if you want to know. And you can't lay any other one. It's only this, Jesus Christ. Well, we'd all say, yes, that's right. Well, what about Jesus Christ? I mean, he didn't just come to them and say the name, Jesus Christ. He said something to them about Jesus Christ. Isn't that right? Paul didn't just come and pronounce the name, say that's the foundation. No, he told them something about Jesus. Well, we don't even have to wonder, with Paul, he tells us again and again and again and again what it is he preached about Jesus. Here we are in chapter 3. Look back in chapter 2 just for a second. Look at this, verse 1. And again, apologize for skipping around. And I, brethren, when I came to you, came not with excellency of speech or of wisdom, declaring unto you the testimony of God. For listen to this, I determined not to know anything among you, save Jesus Christ and him crucified. How about that? He said, when I was with you, when he says, I determined not to know anything among you, save Jesus Christ and him crucified, means that is the focal point of my message. Now that didn't mean, it means he kept that as the center of what he preached. Everything was related to that. I think what he means when he says the foundation is Jesus Christ, he means, he's already written to them this in chapter 2, and I think that's how he understood it. Jesus Christ and what happened when he was crucified, what was accomplished by his crucifixion. What did that mean to us? Now, we can read other epistles, like when he wrote to the Galatians, in chapter 3 of Galatians. You don't need to turn there far, I'm just going to quote it. He said, you foolish Galatians, who hath bewitched you, before whose eyes, he said, Christ hath been evidently set forth crucified among you. See, he was getting on to them, picking on them, because they had forgotten or lost sight of Jesus crucified among them. I just quoted to you, or we read here in chapter 1, and apologize for making you skip around. Look at verse 17, chapter 1. It says, Christ sent me not to baptize, but to preach the gospel, not with wisdom of words, lest the cross of Christ should become of none effect. Verse 18 says, for the preaching of the cross is to them that perish foolishness, but unto us that are saved it's the power of God. Look at verse 23 in chapter 1. But we preach Christ crucified. See, he's saying over and over again, he's telling you what his message is and what he regards as the foundation is Jesus and him crucified. Well, what is Paul's message about Jesus and him crucified? Well, his message about Jesus and him crucified